Are you assuming that the states will do it alone? I thought you're supposed to let them factor in or go into some sort of partnership with the private sector.
Fine. I was privileged to be a member of the Vision 2020 Committee of Delta State. And it was said that about 300 billion naira is required to provide power for Delta State. And that was in the committee paper to be sponsored by state revenue. But I now said it is not proper at this time when people are going into private sector operation in commercial activities. And behold, that is the state's position. And that thing moves nowhere. And now I tell you why we think that the private sector is the driver, is the private sector that can bail Nigeria out of the present economic breakdown. Because where we are is more than what is called recession.
Let's look at something that was focused on recently. The NESG had the summit and the theme was Made in Nigeria.
Excellent.
I can see you're giving us an example of that.
Excellent. Now, the NESG, I felt bad, terribly bad, when I had patronized Made in Nigeria. What good do we have in Nigeria to patronize? Sir, all the cars we buy in this country, we drive in this country, they are all imported. All the tires.
No, but it's not all of them.
Duro, sir.
Not all.
The man whom you said has a motor assembly plant, or the few of them, they are collapsing. And I'm telling you, they are collapsing. You can pick me up on it anytime, any day. And I'll tell you why. These guys depend on about 80% import content of the vehicle they assemble in Nigeria. If that becomes the case, and you are depending on your foreign exchange that have gone to about $24-point-something billion reserve.
I thought Innocent said he's still up and running, and his components is far lower than 80%.
It is only he that wears the shoe that knows where it pinches. For example, today, the quality of the car you produce begets the quality of patronage. Because the way you buy it, that's how you sell it. Today, if the guy is producing and is exporting to West African country 50% of what he produces, and earn foreign exchange to balance the import content of what he imports, he will not be in problem. And I must tell you, sir, what we have taught, what we have designed, the way forward is today there is no Nigerian bank that can support the bailout of Nigerian economy.
Wasn't there some sort of automotive policy in last government that encouraged them to, government agencies now, you must have a certain percentage or so of locally assembled vehicles? I thought that existed before.
You see, Nigeria, we have gotten more than enough policies that have become paper tigers. And I tell you, sir, if you say you want to do an automotive industry, one of the key elements, the driver, the first put is tire. We allowed Michelin and Dunlop to get out of this country. And they are in other West African countries. And for you to even produce the natural rubber that is used as a basic raw material for tire production, you need a 7-year gestation period for rubber plantation. And today, there is no individual that has that drive to invest in any such commercial project and wait for 7 years for it to get to gestation period and get the whole thing running.
Indeed, we have our rubber plantations being cleared down in some of the local communities around the country. But you see, when you started this conversation, you said to get Nigeria out of this place, the private sector needs to be given room.
Excellent.
And I ask you this question. How would the private sector help move Nigeria out if the private sector depends solely on infrastructure provided by government. How would that work?
Now, good. Now, I tell you something, sir. Very many years ago, where there was boom in cocoa, in rubber, in palm oil, the infrastructure we had at that time is not even as sophisticated as what we have now.
Do we have any infrastructure now?
No.
That's what I'm asking.
You see, the ports are there. More ports were built. Sapele Port was built at the time of Shagari. Okay? It wasn't there in the early 50s when a lot of exports were ongoing. And if you get to areas like cocoa, there were big palm oil tanks for export of palm oil outside the Delta region. Okay? And then only recently, a colleague of mine was on business, on your channel business program, and said that the Port Harcourt port was built principally for export because we had the Enugu coal mine. And the nearest point to export coal that is, mined from Enugu was through Port Harcourt. But all of that had evaporated. Okay? So that infrastructure is still there. The only thing that you would ask me to do is the port deep enough to attract inflow of vessels? And I tell you one very painful thing that Nigerians go through. Today, you pay more on every containerized imported cargo than in Cameroon and Abidjan. Because when the manufactured goods are loaded in the containers and brought into Nigeria, the empty containers stay here for over a year. There are no exportable commodity to stuff into the container to go out. So what the shipping lines do is that if the cargo costs $3,000 into Africa, for Nigeria, it's $5,000 per container or $6,000. Because when the container comes here, it has nothing to go back with. So the outward cargo is not there. So the inward cargo, takes the burden of the charges of the empty container.
How would the private sector help clear out?
Excellent. So now, the private sector had carefully and technically looked at the policies that the federal government have provided. Now, the policies are these. Today, we know in the private sector that there's no bank that can give you funds for agriculture. But the direction to go is agriculture. Therefore, we have put together means to borrow loan at the private sector in a private sector initiative, not federal government initiative. 100% by private sector. And these projects are not going to be sited in mere locations, but they're going to be cited as special economic zones. By special economic zones, like the export processing zones. By that, if you borrow foreign loan at 1.5% digit interest rate, you have the capacity, because you have manufactured in large scale, commercial scale, and by that, the cargo can be such that you manufacture, you will export about 75% to 50% of what you produce locally.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment and continue our conversation in just a moment.